The horse picked up speed, and moved along the copse with a steady gait. In the saddle was a young Centurion Philip, nicknamed the Macedonian. The twin brothers christened him so, despite his Greek origin. The commander sent his horse up the hill to inspect the area. The horse neighed loudly, restlessly twitched his head, and pricked his ears, as if he was being led down the wrong road. From the copse came the sound of breaking branches and shouts, similar to the quarrel of the Huns. After a couple of stadia, Philip noticed bloody footprints on the moss and roots. He looked closer, and saw 2 fleeing legionnaires. 2 more stood near the old elms, and cautiously peeked out from behind the trunks. A couple of days ago, 6 youngsters escaped from the legion, who could not stand the hardships of marching life. Philip did not set himself the goal of finding runaway recruits. Legate Arminius commissioned the Macedonian Verdarius to Dacia to transfer important documents. Philip was already returning to the camp when he met the deserters. The fashion for service quickly ended. Rome became rich. Wars turned into the usual pacification of riots. Weak generations held on to a strong foundation, built by the fathers of the Julius Claudian dynasty. In this century, the regular army was recruited not only from the citizens of Rome. Roman youth now aggressively perceived military service, and shirked from service. Legionnaires usually turned a blind eye to fleeing in distant provinces, but this time it was different. Just before the escape, 2 Germans and 3 Gauls were beaten to death. Legate II of Parthia sent scouts to find the killers, but the search was fruitless. For 2 days the horsemen prowled in the surrounding villages. We climbed the forest and walked around the nearest villages. The reconnaissance continued until the order to close the camp was received from the propraetor. Philip hastily left the legion and moved to the border of the Dacian province, to the army of Epicurids. He could not have imagined that he would stumble upon deserters. The rider looked at the dark drops of blood, and started off in the opposite direction. These are not his soldiers, and not his Warthats, how a fellow custodian would put it. Philip decided not to interfere in what was happening, because negotiations with deserters, as a rule, were not crowned with anything worthwhile. He was saving his strength. It was a day of horse riding to the nearest stop. While the piebald was gaining momentum, a heartrending scream burst out of the forest thicket. Philip swore, turned his horse around, and galloped towards the bloody tracks that led into the forest. Half a mile later he came across a corpse, in a torn legionary tunic with a pierced head. The unlaced lorica hamata was lying nearby. Filthy beasts! Tear your hands off! Philip did not want to chase the fugitives. The mare stood still for some time, and anxiously moved her nostrils. The Macedonian was not looking for problems on his head, and did not want to waste time. But the body in the foliage gave Philip strange thoughts. He thought that the sword was longing for the scoundrels. The Macedonian spat, pulled out the gladius, and ran at full speed along the trodden forest path. A couple of minutes later, Philip came out to the stream that flowed into the Danuvium. 4 legionaries were trampling on a rock in the hollow. As soon as the rider appeared, the 3 ran away. But the 4th one didn't even budge. Through the eyes of a little Asian nomad, the young man looked at Philip, his sturdy cuirass and naked blade. The deserter slowly knelt down, and began to wash his hands, which were stained with dirt, mixed with blood up to his shoulders. Philip slowly steered his horse towards the guy. He did not take his eyes off him, and did not put away his sword. The Macedonian considered himself an experienced warrior, well versed. He sincerely did not understand why the boy's face did not reflect fear. The sight of the boy discouraged Philip. The young man looked about 15 years old. "You've been looking for us for a long time." He got to his feet, and wiped his lips. The whole forest was plowed with hooves. "What will you do?" Philip smiled faintly, and brought his horse closer. "For the deprivation of life, you need to have the right, or the desire. I have neither one nor the other, although the second was at first. I see you're pretty good at breaking heads. We are not at war to kill in vain, especially comrades in arms. Why are you not so heroic in the ranks against the quads? All of you are easy on the upswing. When it is necessary to substitute a sister, you will come with me to my camp, and there you will draw lots. Decimation? For desertion?" The kid grinned. "Is that a punishment in your legion?" "Not only in mine." Philip became stern. "Decimation is remembered on the worst days. A dozen or two fugitives are caught every day, and if everyone is beaten with sticks, there will be no one to serve. Beat your own, so that strangers are afraid, you know, right?" These are not simple words for a Roman legionary, my young friend. All legions have one type of punishment, which we have no right to violate. If I don't agree, I can give your insolent face to the legate. As a murderer, you will be scourged, and then crucified like a pathetic criminal. And they won't see that you worked for the good of Rome. I don't want such a shame." The young man pulled off a torn tunic. "Do your duty here and now. Or what do you Romans call it?" Philip was surprised at such submission, and readiness for death. The Macedonian jumped down from his horse, and motioned the youngster onto his lap. The condemned man carried out the order with the same imperturbable look. The Macedonian grabbed the guy by the head, put the sword to his collarbone, and rested on the hilt. "You have been magnanimous. Not every legionnaire falls into the hands of a ferryman with his head on his shoulders. Even though you are a deserter, I will kill you as a warrior. You are not afraid of pain and death, but you still escaped from the legion. What is your name?" "Valent," the deserter whispered. With such audacity, he could have reached the Primipal. "Farewell, Valens, the doomed son of Rome." Philip tightened his grip on the hilt, ready to strike. There was a growl nearby. The Macedonian became alert, and Valens fell into a stupor. The sound was getting closer, getting louder, and a moment later a tiger came out from behind a half-rotten poplar. The Macedonian had never seen striped cats, but guessed that it was a tiger in front of him. Philip's unnaturally bright fur and predatory grin made his eyes glow, and his back was covered with cold from the size. The tiger was so monstrous in size that a lion on its background would look like a puppy with a horse's mane. Terrified, Valens pushed Philip back, looking for stones for protection. The boy stared with wide eyes at the beast, which stopped 10 cubits away from him. The tiger played with his tail, and let out a measured growl, boring people with his eyes. The young man crawled on all fours to the predator, and did not take his eyes off the immense mouth. "Stop. He'll tear you apart like a rag. Did you feel the power inside?" The warrior was not afraid of the beast. After all, he was holding a sharp gladius in his hand, and there was also a sword hanging from his belt, and 2 daggers were attached. And he had seen worse things in the war than the sudden appearance of a big cat in the woods. Philip was more alarmed by the fact that there were no tigers at all in the forests of Dacia. He used to cross paths only with wolves and foxes. The ducks even caught hares, and the meeting with the bear was considered a real event. Tigers were brought only to gladiatorial arenas, or for the entertainment of imperial offspring. The Macedonian thought that the huge beast had escaped from the bestiaries, but the nearest arena was 900 miles away. He pulled out his second sword, and prepared to either repel the attack, or save his life and escape. As soon as the tiger heard the sound of clanking metal, it bared its teeth, and resolutely moved towards the threat. "Just don't run away," Valent said through clenched teeth. "Tigers do not attack the enemy in the face." "How do you know?" Philip snapped, trying not to show his fear. "These are the habits of any predator, if you didn't know." Valent looked into the giant's eyes, trying not to blink. The inquisitive eyes of the beast converged with the intense gaze of the man. The tiger opened its mouth, which could easily fit Valent's head, growled and sniffed the guy. The beast walked around for a long time, and then abruptly waved its tail and left, as if it decided to have dinner elsewhere. The silhouette of the animal slowly disappeared behind a poplar tree. Footprints of unimaginable size were left on the foliage. The Macedonian remembered how 2 years ago the 4 of them attacked a bear. The enraged beast was seized with such a thirst for blood that he tore 3 legionnaires beyond recognition. The tiger was twice as big as the bear that Philip remembered. The Macedonian asked, hiding the trembling in his hands. The young man calmed his own tremor and looked at the warrior. "Valent, that's not what I'm talking about. How did you drive him away?" "This is how predators behave when they meet in the forest. An equal does not attack an equal." Valens turned his back on the Macedonian, and knelt down again to continue the failed execution. It seemed like an eternity had passed. Philip was thinking what to do. He sheathed his sword, and lifted the boy from his knees. "Today is not the best day to administer justice. I just saw a sign sent by Zeus himself. The Greeks are strange people.
So
We see
Romans.
symbolism in everything.
You don't
look like a Roman. Half-breed. Apparently. You look like a Dak or a Thracian. Come with me. If you try to escape, I'll kill you." Philip took a rope from under the saddle, and tied Valent's hands. After all, the guy had done a lot of mischief, and the Macedonian did not trust him. He put him on the horse, and a moment later settled down next to him. The steed raced past the poplar, and came out on the trail. Philip was looking around intently, waiting for the tiger's fatal leap. As soon as they left the forest, the Macedonian realized that the beast had left no traces behind, as if it had not touched the ground. Philip could have sworn on the altar of Artemis that the paw marks of the massive carcass had evaporated. He turned his head in all directions, but did not see even a hint of the presence of a predator, as if his appearance was a phantom. Philip has never seen tigers, and today he met 2 at once.